Rain fell as soft as breath that morning, tapping gentle rhythms on wood and windowpane, seeping into soil, into skin, into memory. Chaska stood at the edge of the bluff, bare-chested beneath the rolling clouds, his long black hair darkened by the sky's sorrow. He didn't flinch as thunder rumbled low, like some great animal shifting in sleep far above. His arms bore old scars and new silence. In his hand, he held nothing but the scent of wet pine and the weight of distance. Below him, the town stirred in pockets. Chimneys exhaled pale smoke. Horses huffed in stalls. Folks buttoned their coats and quickened their steps, not just to keep from the rain, but to avoid each other's eyes. The valley never truly rested. It just waited, like a held breath, for its people to rise and fall. Down the muddy path, barefoot and small, came Ellie Dobbs, her dress too short now, her braids uneven but proud. Her bare feet slapped the wet road like tiny drums. She clutched a folded square of paper close to her chest, as if it were gold leaf, and not cheap paper from the mercantile. "Don't step in the big puddles," her mama had warned. "The water's deeper than it looks." But Ellie loved stepping where she shouldn't. She passed Miss Clover's porch first. The older woman sipped chicory coffee behind her curtains, eyes hawk-sharp. Her mouth pinched as she saw the child heading toward the ridge trail. That's where he lived. That's where no one else went. Ellie didn't knock on doors or stop to chat. She didn't need to. Her mission was clear, her little legs sure, even as the rain turned heavier, and the wind braided through the tall grass like ghost fingers. She paused once, beneath the blacksmith's awning, where sparks used to fly like summer stars. No one worked there anymore. Just a broken anvil and silence. Up the ridge she climbed, mud clinging to her feet like second skin. Trees closed around her. The world quieted. Even the rain seemed to hush out of respect. And far above, Chaska turned slightly, as if the earth had whispered something meant only for him. He saw her before she saw him, this little stormwalker with fire in her steps. She reminded him of a flame that refused to gutter out, no matter how wet the world became. She didn't speak when she reached his cabin, a crooked structure of timber and sod built with hands that had once built other things. Homes, fences, hope. Instead, she reached up and pinned the paper to the rough wood beside his door with a long pine needle. Then she looked toward the trees, gave a tiny nod as if thanking them, and left without ever turning her back. Chaska remained motionless, waiting until the forest stilled again. Then he walked to the door, pulled the paper free with calloused fingers, and opened it carefully. The letters were uneven, like the steps of a child on a cold floor. "You're invited to Ellie's birthday. Mama is sick, but she'll smile if you come. No date. No hour. Just a wish, drawn in blue crayon." He read it twice. Then again. Far below, the townspeople continued their quiet morning rituals. They spoke of the weather, not the girl. They nodded to one another, not out of warmth, but out of habit. Mayor Clem Barrow tightened his suspenders on his porch and spat toward the wet road. "Mark my words," he said to no one. "That child'll end up wild, same as her mama. Or worse, end up trusting the wrong sort." He meant Chaska. Willa May Dobbs lay in bed, her breath thin as spiderwebs, her body wrapped in quilts patched from dresses long worn and memories half faded. Her skin was the color of paper left in sunlight, her lips dry and pinked with fever. A teacup with untouched broth sat on the nightstand, and a child's ribbon lay draped over her wrist. Ellie came in, cheeks flushed, hair wet with mist. "Mama," she said, "I gave it to him." Willa May smiled faintly. "You found him then?" "He was there. Watchin'. He didn't say nothin'. But I know he saw it." "Good," her mother whispered. "You're braver than the whole town put together." Ellie climbed into the bed beside her, curling under her mother's thin arm. Outside, the clouds thickened. The rain would not stop soon. Chaska sat by his fire that night, the invitation laid before him like a fragile commandment. He'd seen sickness before. He'd buried family on hills where the wind never ceased. But there was something in those crayon curves, in the word smile, that lodged inside his chest like an arrow too deep to pull. He remembered Ellie from the winter before. She had seen him skinning a deer near the creek and waved. No flinch. No fear. Just a wave. She was the first human in years to acknowledge him without scorn. And Willa May? He'd glimpsed her from afar, once or twice. Hanging out quilts. Holding herself like a willow tree. Bent but not broken. The fire popped softly. He turned the paper over. On the back was a drawing. A stick figure of a little girl holding hands with a tall man beside a cabin. A sun peeked through clouds. And a heart floated above. He stared at it for a long time. The next morning, the town buzzed over gossip like bees without flowers. Miss Clover told the schoolteacher that she'd seen that half-wild child near the ridge. The preacher's wife clucked her tongue. Even the man who sold nails at the general store muttered, "Shouldn't be encouraging her." But they said it all behind closed shutters, like cowards do. Back at the cabin, Willa May's cough worsened. Ellie brought her wildflowers crushed in her pocket, and a broken button she claimed was lucky. "Did he say he's comin', Mama?" Willa May kissed her daughter's forehead. "Not in words, baby girl. But I believe he heard you." Out in the woods, Chaska began carving. He didn't know what shape it would be yet. Perhaps a bird, perhaps a fox, but he let the blade speak through cedar and silence. He worked with care, not haste. The kind of care only given to things you mean to give away. By dusk, the figure began to take form. And far off, the wind turned cool, the way it does when something in the world shifts slightly out of its usual place. A kind of tilt. A premonition. Ellie lit a candle by the window, watched it flicker, and whispered a wish. "Let him come! Mama needs something beautiful." She didn't know Chaska had already stepped out into the trees with the carved gift wrapped in buckskin. He didn't know that rain was coming again. But the wind knew. And it carried both their names. The rain had eased by morning, but the sky still hung low and gray, like a quilt stitched from sorrow and unfinished prayers. The kind of sky that made folks speak softer, move slower, and look twice before saying a name. Chaska moved through the town like a shadow without malice. He did not wear a shirt as always, only a woven red sash across his chest, and the weight of his past over his shoulders. A bundle of pelts hung from one hand. His moccasins barely made a sound as he stepped into the edge of the town's lifeblood, the general store. The bell above the door did not ring for him. It was long broken. Still, heads turned when he entered. Conversations halted. Old floorboards seemed to creak louder in his presence, as if protesting his return. Behind the counter, Mr. Trent stiffened. He was not a cruel man, only a careful one, anxious not to offend the mayor or the whispering women who made or unmade reputations over spools of thread and barrels of flour. Chaska placed the bundle down. Elk hide, supple and clean. Beaver, fox, even one rare snow hare. "Store credit," he said, voice low, throat dry. Mr. Trent nodded once and made note. No handshake was offered. As Chaska turned to leave, a small boy near the licorice barrel looked up at him, eyes wide, lips parted. Chaska gave the faintest nod. The boy's mother pulled him behind her skirt like he'd touched fire. Outside, behind the pane, Miss Clover stood with two other women, clutching her parasol despite the overcast sky. "They say he watches from the trees," she murmured. "Just stands there, watching that widow's house like a wolf sniffing the edge of the pen." "He was blamed for that barn fire," another added. "Nearly burned the whole South Ridge. And now he's sniffing after a sick woman and her child?" Clover's voice curled like smoke. God protect them. Not one of them had seen the fire. Not one of them knew who had saved the boy trapped beneath the beam. But they remembered that Chaska had no alibi. And no words. Silence, after all, was a strange man's guilt in a small town. Back at the cabin, Willa May tried to bake. Her hands trembled as she poured what little flour she had into a chipped bowl. She stirred slowly, each movement deliberate, like one might cradle a bird with broken wings. Her cough came in soft fits, not violent, but ever-present, like footsteps pacing behind her ribs. "Ellie," she called, voice thin, "bring me that blue ribbon from the drawer." The little girl ran in, holding it high like a banner. "Will it go in your hair, Mama?" "No, baby. For your cake." Willa May smiled as she tied it around a jar of jam. They had no sugar left, but the ribbon made the jar look like a gift, and that was enough. "I wish we could make 2 cakes," Ellie said, swinging her legs under the table. "One for me, and one for the man who's coming." Willa May paused. "You really believe he will?" Ellie nodded. "He already did. In the rain." Willa May brushed a lock of hair from her daughter's brow. "Then we'll save him a slice." Back in town, the mayor leaned over a poker table at the saloon, his voice slick with ale and pride. "I won't have that man circling our womenfolk," Clem Barrow said, slapping a card down. "A savage, no matter how quiet, is still a danger when left too long among the civilized." Across the room, old Joe Silvers twitched behind the piano. He wasn't drunk, but he swayed like he was. Half blind, half forgotten, he leaned forward. "You remember who saved your sister from that fire, Clem?" The mayor turned, lips thin. "You best hush, Joe." Joe chuckled and played a single note. "I never forget kindness. Or cowards." The mayor looked away. In the hills that dusk, Chaska moved through the pines. The carved bird in his satchel was finished now, a small thing, but shaped with care. Its wings curved in flight. Its eyes were deep and sad, like they'd seen too much and still wanted to fly. He didn't plan to stay long. Just leave it by the steps and vanish like a morning fog. He knew how these things worked. The closer he came, the more they'd pull away. Still, his feet carried him forward. The cabin came into view, soft with lamplight. A curtain fluttered. The little girl stood at the window, clutching a doll made of corn husk and string. She waved. Not big, just a flick of her hand like a whisper. He paused. She opened the door. "You came." He didn't answer. "I saved you a slice," she said, holding out a small plate covered with a kerchief. It was warm. The jam had melted slightly over the top. From inside, Willa May's voice called weakly, "Ellie, don't be rude now." Chaska took the plate. "You made this?" he asked. She nodded. He set the carved bird on the porch rail. "For you." She took it like it was sacred. "Mama will cry. But the happy kind." And then, with all the certainty of a preacher mid-sermon, Ellie whispered, "You'll come to the party, won't you?" He should have said no. Should have melted back into the trees. Should have remembered the town's eyes, the gossip, the sharpened tongues. But he looked at her, barefoot and bold, rain-damp and radiant. He gave the slightest nod. As he turned to go, Willa May stepped into the doorway. She wore a shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, her breath short, her spine straight. Their eyes met. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The storm in him stilled. He left without a word. But behind him, Ellie turned to her mother with the joy of 1,000 sons and said, "He's coming, Mama. I told you." And Willa May, whose heart had broken so many times it should have been dust, let her eyes fill with quiet warmth. "We'll need a second plate then." Back at the general store the next morning, Miss Clover clucked her tongue as she told the schoolteacher what she'd seen. He was on her porch, shirtless, like some jungle animal offering gifts. That child touched him. The teacher gasped. "Did you tell the preacher?" "The preacher?" "I told the mayor." And by noon, the whispers turned to warnings. "Dangerous," said the banker. "Unnatural," said the seamstress. "Maybe he's just lonely," said no one. The morning broke pale and blue, as if the sky itself had been holding its breath all night. Dew shimmered on fence posts, and mist hugged the ground in low curls, reluctant to lift. It was Ellie's birthday. She woke before the sun fully rose, cheeks flushed with anticipation, not from cake or ribbons, though she wished for both, but from belief. Children carry faith the way grown folk carry burdens, and hers was heavy with hope. "Mama," she whispered, peeking into the quilt-draped bed. "It's today." Willa May stirred, her breath shallow, her skin cool from the night. "Happy birthday, darlin'," she said, managing a smile that flickered like lamplight. "I'll ask them all. Even if they don't come, I'll ask." Willa May touched her daughter's cheek. "You have a kind heart, Ellie. Don't let this world shrink it." By mid-morning, Ellie had tied her hair with leftover ribbon, and wore a dress 2 sizes too small. Her shoes were missing again, but she didn't care. She walked barefoot from house to house with an open smile, and a handful of invitations she'd drawn with a single blue crayon. "Would you come?" she asked a woman sweeping her porch. "Oh, honey, well, I'll see," the woman murmured, not meeting her eyes. "Today's my birthday. Mama's making jam pie. It's sweet." "That's nice." At the schoolhouse, she asked the teacher, who smiled in that tilted way grown-ups do when they're deciding whether kindness will cost too much. "I hope it's a wonderful day, Ellie," was all she said. The children in the yard looked up but didn't speak. One girl half raised her hand to wave, then let it fall. It wasn't cruelty. It was quiet fear passed down in dinner-table whispers. Fear of sickness. Of poverty. Of that man in the woods who didn't belong. Still, Ellie walked on, a soft breeze lifting her hair like wild silk. Her steps were lighter than her heart, and she returned home empty-handed but not empty-hearted. Inside, Willa May had braided her hair and pressed a small linen napkin. On the table sat the birthday pie, warm, split down the middle but still fragrant. There were 2 spoons. One of them gleamed like it had been polished all night. "Just us," Willa May said gently. Ellie nodded and sat. She closed her eyes, made a wish so big it couldn't fit inside her chest, and blew out the stub of a candle held up in an empty medicine bottle. "I wished he'd come," she whispered. Outside, a wind rustled the pine needles, and the world exhaled. Up in the hills, Chaska stood at the tree line holding the carved bird. He had planned to leave it. That was all. Place it near the cabin, unseen, and vanish before anyone could see a wild man trying to be gentle. But the rain had come again. It moved like a veil, soft and gray and cleansing. His hair clung to his back. The carved bird, now oiled and smoothed, felt warm in his hand. He stepped forward. The cabin stood with its single lamp glowing golden in the window. The light flickered, like a heart still beating inside a failing body. Chaska walked slow. At the edge of the clearing, he paused. Through the pane he saw her, Willa May, propped in a chair, her shawl pulled tightly, hands trembling as she set 2 plates. Ellie danced around her with a paper crown made of folded mercantile flyers. The world slowed. He crossed the final steps and raised his hand. But before he could knock, the door opened. Ellie stood there, soaked from running out into the rain without a second thought. Her smile nearly knocked the wind from him. "I knew you'd come." He tried to speak, but his voice had rusted from disuse. She didn't wait. She pulled him inside by the hand, placed the carved bird on the table, and shouted, "Mama! Look!" Willa May turned her head. She saw him, rain-soaked, unsure, tall as myth and scarred by life. She didn't flinch. Chaska reached into his satchel and placed a bundle on the table. Inside was a jar of mountain honey and a sprig of wild mint. His offering. "Happy birthday," he said softly. Willa May nodded once, as if acknowledging something far deeper than a gesture. "Sit," she said. "If you don't mind bad pie and good company." He sat. Ellie passed out spoons like she was queen of a feast. The 3 of them, one broken woman, one forgotten man, and one stubborn girl, ate together beneath the low creak of the roof and the gentle tap of rain. No one spoke much. But silence, when shared, is a language all its own. After the pie, Ellie brought out her birthday drawing, a new one, fresh and bright. This time it showed 3 figures, a tall man, a woman with a shawl, and a little girl between them. Above their heads floated a heart. Below their feet, tiny flowers bloomed. "See?" she said, handing it to Chaska. "It's us now." He took the paper carefully, as if it were scripture. From outside, someone clapped. They all froze. Willa May stood shakily and pulled aside the curtain. Across the road on the nearest porch, a child stood clapping. Behind her, her mother watched but didn't stop her. Another window opened, just a crack. A flicker of curiosity from the town. Chaska stood. Willa May placed a hand on his arm. Her touch was feather-light, but it steadied him. "You've done nothing wrong," she said. "They can look all they want." He nodded once. Rain began again in earnest. "I should go," he said. "Wait," Ellie said. She ran into the back room and returned with a small ribbon. Blue, worn, but clean. She tied it around the carved bird's neck. So it knows it belongs. He didn't speak. Just nodded, tucked the bird under his arm, and turned toward the rain. He reached the trees before looking back. Willa May stood in the doorway, shawl lifted to block the wind, her eyes soft. She didn't wave. She just watched him like someone seeing the sun rise for the first time in a long while. Inside, Ellie lit a single candle on the windowsill. It glowed against the rain, a flicker of proof that someone had come, someone had stayed, even for just a moment. That night, long after Ellie slept curled like a kitten beneath her quilt, Willa May sat alone at the table. The pie tin was empty. The rain had stopped. Her breath came easier for once. She looked at the empty seat across from her. Then at the candle. Then, faintly, she smiled. Morning returned, not gently but with a whip of wind and cloud. The sky wore bruises, blue-gray swells and fast-moving shadows that raced over rooftops like bad omens. The kind of day when something changes, and everyone feels it before it's said aloud. At the general store the bell jingled twice, first for the teacher, then for Miss Clover, who arrived wrapped in moral certainty and a shawl thick enough to carry judgment. "She let him inside," Clover said, dropping her voice as if it might crack glass. "The child even hugged him. Right there, in that little house by the woods." The teacher gasped, not because she hadn't suspected, but because Clover's words gave the rumor blood and bones. "Willa May invited him to her daughter's birthday," Clover added, with an expression between pity and scandal. "And he stayed." "He touched the child?" The teacher whispered. Clover didn't answer. She didn't have to. Word leapt like fire from porch to pew, from woodpile to washline. Chaska had been near the child. Chaska had eaten under her roof. Chaska had touched their world. By noon, the town square simmered. At the saloon, the mayor was already 3 drinks into righteousness. "I warned y'all," he said, slamming his tin cup on the table. "I said that Apache'd come too close. Now he's inside a widow's house? Sittin' with a child." A few men nodded. Others looked uneasy. One of them, Hank Wilmer, shifted in his seat. "But didn't he just bring a gift? That's what my boy said." Clem Barrow sneered. "That's how it starts. They come with gifts. Then they take." No one challenged him. No one ever did. Back at the cabin, Willa May stood by the stove, eyes cloudy from fever but spine straight. She stirred beans slowly while Ellie drew at the table, humming something sweet and tuneless. The carved bird sat on the windowsill with the blue ribbon still tied around its neck. "You think he'll come again?" Ellie asked. Willa May didn't answer right away. She leaned against the counter, steadying her breath. "I think he might," she said. "If he's not run off first." Ellie looked up. "Why would he run?" "Because this town bites things it doesn't understand." Ellie tilted her head. "He's not scary, Mama. He's kind." Willa May smiled, but it faded quick. Her heart beat faster when she heard footsteps approach outside. Not soft like Chaska's, but heavy and sure. She opened the door just as the mayor raised his fist to knock. Behind him stood 2 other men, boots muddy, eyes sharp. "Good morning," she said. "Ma'am," Clem said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We need to talk about the company you're keepin'." Willa May stepped onto the porch, barefoot, arms crossed under her shawl. "You mean the man who saved my daughter from wanderin' into the woods alone? The one who carved her a gift and shared our table like a gentleman?" Clem's mouth tightened. "He don't belong here. This town's got long memories and short mercy," she said. "He never harmed no one. But I can't say the same for some of your friends." One of the men behind him bristled, but Clem raised a hand. "Think of your child, Willa May. What kind of future you want for her?" Willa May's eyes gleamed, not with anger but with clarity. "One where kindness ain't punished." She turned and went back inside. The door clicked shut like a gavel. But gossip isn't stopped by doors. That night, no one came to check on her. The preacher did not visit. No baskets of food or offers of help arrived. Only silence. And silence can starve a person faster than hunger. Ellie crawled into bed beside her mama and whispered, "I heard him say we're cursed." Willa May stroked her hair. "They said the same about your papa when he married me." "Did they stop?" "Not until he died." They lay quiet. In the forest, Chaska sharpened a stone blade against the moonlight. He'd heard the rumors. They reached him like smoke, curling under doorways, slipping into the still places. He stood at the river's edge, eyes on the black water. He could leave. He'd done it before. When the fire had stolen trust from the town's lungs. When they turned his silence into guilt. When a boy he'd saved wept in secret but said nothing in public. But Ellie had drawn him in crayon with a heart over their heads. And Willa May had not looked away. He turned toward the cabin. He would stay. The next day, rain returned in silver threads. Ellie had gone to collect kindling. Willa May watched from the window, swaying gently with exhaustion, hand pressed to her ribs. A shot cracked through the trees. She froze. "Ellie!" she screamed, stumbling for the door, heart thundering. Another shot. Then rustling. She ran, barefoot, thin gown soaked through, lungs on fire. At the edge of the wood, she collapsed in mud and leaves. But Ellie was there, wide-eyed, unharmed, wrapped in the folds of a woven sash. Chaska stood behind her, bow drawn, face unreadable. A cougar had been stalking. Now it lay half visible in the grass, its eyes still wide with dying surprise. Ellie pointed. "He saved me again, Mama." Willa May tried to speak, but the world spun. She fell, eyes fluttering, breath caught. Chaska caught her. She was light, too light. Bones and illness and worn-down grace. He carried her back through the rain, cradled against his chest like something sacred. Ellie walked beside them, hand gripping the hem of his trousers. The town saw. Windows opened. A few doors cracked. People watched as the shirtless Apache carried the dying woman, and walked beside her child, as if they were already his. When they reached the cabin, he laid her gently on the bed, covered her with quilts, placed water beside her hand, then stood in the doorway as the townsfolk approached. They came slow, torches in hand, words sharpened in their throats. Clem stood at the front. "You touch her again," he said. "You'll be hung before sunrise." Ellie stepped forward. "He didn't hurt Mama. She's sick, child. Can't tell what's good for her." Chaska didn't speak. Just stood tall, still, unflinching. Then Willa May rose. Her feet trembled. Her voice did not. "He saved us. Again. When all of you stood behind curtains." She coughed hard, then straightened. "I'd rather my child grow up near a good man they fear than in the arms of men who pretend to be holy." Silence. Then old Joe stepped out from behind the crowd. His limp was worse now. His eyes watery. He raised his hand. "Man's father once saved my sister from drownin'. Carried her 10 miles with a broken leg. Same spirit lives in this one." No one spoke. The torches lowered. But fire still lingered in the air. The mayor turned, face like stone. "This ain't over." And he left. The others followed, slower. Chaska stood in the rain, breath calm. Inside, Willa May lay back, her eyes closing from the effort. But her voice still found strength. "You don't have to keep comin'," she whispered. He turned to her. "I will," he said. Ellie lit a candle. The gossip might have teeth. But in this house, there was still light. The rain returned with weight. Not a drizzle, not a soft hymn, but a full-throated downpour, pounding the rooftops, hushing the world into reverence. Water ran in rivulets down the dusty lanes, turned earth to slick clay, and beat upon the wooden shingles of Willa May's cabin, as if the sky itself had come to witness something holy. Inside, Willa May lay quiet, her breath fluttering like candlelight in wind. Her hands were folded over her chest, still warm but growing tired. Her body, so full of endurance, now moved as if each breath were a burden lifted only out of love for the girl asleep beside her. Ellie had curled close, one hand resting on her mama's shawl. Her drawings were still pinned along the walls, little stick figures of families, hearts hovering above them like halos. The carved bird sat on the windowsill, ribbon faded but still holding. At the window, Chaska stood. He had come each day since the townspeople turned back, not with words, but with actions. Firewood stacked neat at the door. Fresh caught fish. Berries. Flowers. He never stayed long. Just enough to make sure they were still breathing. Still warm. Still holding on. But today, he hadn't left. Today he stayed. He pulled the shawl tighter over Willa May's shoulders. She stirred, eyes flickering open. "You stayed," she whispered. "I did." "You shouldn't." He looked at her, rain streaking down his skin like it was trying to baptize him. "I will." She smiled faintly. "Then let the town talk." "I've let them talk all my life." Thunder groaned above. Ellie woke, blinking up at him. "Will you take me fishin' someday?" she asked. "Yes." "And Mama too?" Chaska looked to Willa May, who gave the smallest nod. "If she's strong enough." "Then I'll get strong," Willa May said, with a smile like sunlight under snow. "Even if it kills me." They all laughed softly. Then a knock, sudden, sharp. Not at the front. At the back. Chaska moved quickly, instincts sharpened by solitude. He reached the door in 2 strides and opened it just enough to see. A man stood in the rain, face half-shadowed under his hat. "Evenin'," he said. "Mayor wants a word. Says you need to come explain yourself to the council. Tonight." "Council?" Willa May coughed behind him. "In a storm." "Truth don't wait for dry weather," the man said. Chaska looked him in the eye. "No." The man didn't argue. He just tipped his hat and walked away. But not alone. From the trees, Chaska saw the glint of oil lamps. 4, maybe 5 men. "Trouble?" Willa May asked. "Yes." Ellie's eyes went wide. "Are they comin' to take you?" He didn't answer. But she stood up. "They can't. Mama says you're ours." That made something twist inside him, sharp and deep. Outside, the footsteps returned. No more knocking. Just heavy boots in the mud, encircling. Then a shout. "You got till the count of 10, Injun." Chaska moved Willa May and Ellie into the back room, gently but firmly. "Don't come out," he said. He stepped outside. The storm blurred everything, the torches, the faces, the weapons. Clem Barrow stood at the front, soaked but smirking. "Told you this wasn't over." "I've harmed no one," Chaska said calmly. "No. But you make people nervous. And nervous men start thinkin'. That little girl, she don't need you fillin' her head with stories. Or worse. She invited me." "And the mother?" "She welcomed me." "That sick woman's not fit to judge what's safe." Chaska said nothing. Just stood in the rain, shoulders bare, gaze steady. Behind him, inside the cabin, the candles still burned. The mayor raised a hand. 2 men moved forward. But before they could step close, a new voice rang out. "I wouldn't." Old Joe. Half blind. Half limp. Whole heart. He stepped into the clearing, holding only a cane, eyes lit with something fierce. "This man's done more for this town in silence than you ever did with speeches, Clem. He's trespassed." "No. You did. On decency." One by one, more figures appeared. Townsfolk, lanterns in hand. The schoolteacher. The blacksmith's widow. Even the boy from the licorice barrel. They said nothing, just stood behind Chaska like wind behind a flame. Clem spat. "You're all fools." Then he turned and walked away, his torch hissing in the rain. One by one, the others followed. Soon, only the sound of rain remained. Chaska went inside. Willa May sat propped against pillows, her hand over her heart. "You didn't fight them," she said softly. "No. You didn't have to." "No." She looked up at him with eyes that still held light. "Will you stay?" "Yes." "Even when I'm gone?" He didn't speak. Just reached down, took her hand and kissed her fingers. Ellie climbed into her lap. "You're not going anywhere." "No, baby. Not yet." That night, they lit a second candle. And then a third. Rain beat against the roof like 1,000 soft drums, and inside, they sat in warmth and silence. 3 souls who had found each other through storms. 3 souls who'd chosen to stay. The town did not speak of it much after that. But the whispers softened. And in time, they faded. Years later, they would say there was a girl who grew up barefoot and wild and joyful. That her mama had been fragile as lace but full of fire. That a man from the woods came down in the rain and never left. And no one could quite say when he became family. But those who knew, they remembered. Because the candle never went out. In this world full of noise and sharp-edged talk, sometimes the ones who change your life don't arrive shouting. They walk through storms. They kneel by sickbeds. They carve quiet things with their hands and give without asking anything back. And if you're lucky, blessed, even, you'll recognize them not by what they say, but by how they stay.